It's great to be with you today and hard to follow Caleb. It was a great speech, and we have very similar topics. The main difference, though, is mine is 47 minutes long. That's a joke. Just kidding. Uh, the board is behind me, which is why they're all going to tackle me if I were actually telling the truth. Congratulations, graduates and family. This moment is no small thing. You've crossed a threshold into a world full of possibility and noise. A world that promises you everything, infinite information, endless entertainment, and countless ways to define yourself. But here's the truth. Your legacy won't be built on what you consume or how clever your posts are. It won't be on your job titles or the hobbies you love. It will be built on who you love and who shows up when you cross the river. Now, let me explain what that means. How many of you have seen the movie Big Fish? All right, just a few of you. It's one of my favorite movies. Jason back there has my back. In the film Big Fish, Edward Bloom is a man who tells these tall tales of giants and werewolves and witches and improbable adventures. And his son is a little more literal in life. And he's constantly frustrated by these exaggerations. He wants to know his dad. He wants the facts of his dad's life. He doesn't want these fables. But as the main character, the father, Edward, nears the end of his life, Will begins to see that while the details were embellished, the heart of these stories were real. They were rooted in people. And at the end of Edward's life, all these characters, all those lives that he touched, come to say goodbye as he gathers at the end of his life. And Will realizes that the truth wasn't in the size of the stories. It was because it was full of connection. And when he was carried to the river, he transforms into this big fish. But he's surrounded by all the people that he touched and all the people that he loved, and he was not alone. Now, I had a realization watching this movie several years ago. I was going through a period where I was feeling very overwhelmed by current events. Does anybody recognize that feeling? The ending taught me a powerful lesson in shrinking our field of vision to serve the people around us, to serve our circle of people. Our sphere of influence is where God has called us to work. It is the people around us. And there are no doubts that the events that happen in China, Washington, D.C., Florida, or Southport are important. But are we called to shape those events? I think we're often trying to find meaning in sharing our opinions about these world events, and we neglect the actual people and places around us that God has called us to transform. No one in this room is guiltier of that than I am, I can assure you. But this has left us more divided as a country, lonelier than many of our parents and grandparents. And while technology has been a blessing, it certainly is a contributing factor. And it is a deep distraction of the work of the kingdom. It's a great irony of our age that while we are better connected than ever before, your generation especially, you're the loneliest generation. I spent a fair amount of time researching loneliness, especially in your generation over the last couple years. And let me give you one statistic, that 50% of Americans have 3 or fewer closer friends. And in 1990, that number was 25%. In every metric, Americans are facing a loneliness crisis, and this country needs leaders in solving it. I say this as someone who has spent a career in media. The world will tempt you to build a platform for yourself, maybe for a cause, but Jesus calls you to build a table, one where people sit down and break bread and are seen and are loved. Let me introduce you to someone who did that. Her name is Jane Addams. Born into wealth and comfort in the 1860s, Illinois, Jane was a brilliant and ambitious woman. Her father, John Addams, not that one, was a personal friend of Abraham Lincoln. He was a mill owner and a banker, and he passed away when she was young, unfortunately around your age, and she was left with the equivalent of $1 million in inheritance. She had everything. She had status, she had money, and she could live in comfort for the rest of her life. But she didn't. She used that privilege to escape the world's pain. She could have used it to escape the world's pain, but she walked straight into it instead. On a trip in 1889, after visiting London's settlement houses, she returned to Chicago. Now, Chicago in 1889 was a pretty gruesome place. It was the stockyards. If your parents or your curriculum had you read Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, that's the world that she walked into. She founded Hull House, a community center in a poor immigrant neighborhood. Settlement houses were a new idea at the time, places that were planted in struggling communities where reformers didn't just offer services like we think of nonprofits today. They moved in, they shared life with the people that they were serving. They set up houses, and it wasn't just poor relief. It was intellectual stimulation, education, healthcare, job training. And the key of it was proximity and presence with the people. The message was, we're not above you, we're here with you, sitting in your struggles. Now, at a time when most women could only be teachers by trade, she made the Christian countercultural choice to move in next door to people that most of her class avoided. It wasn't glamorous and it didn't make headlines every day, but Hull House became a refuge, offering education, art, medicine, childcare, and that mission lasted until roughly 2012. So her presence reshaped an entire area. Hull House became a model for over 400 settlement houses across America. She helped pioneer the field of social work, fought to end child labor, and advocated for safe working conditions, public sanitation, and education reform. She ended up co-founding the ACLU to defend civil liberties, and in 1931, she was the first American woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize for her commitment to peace and justice. She didn't just serve poor and immigrants in her area, she dignified them. And she believed that loving your neighbor meant not just meeting needs, but changing systems that created the needs in the first place. Now, it's easy to listen back to someone's legacy and be intimidated, especially when somebody won a Nobel Peace Prize and started out with $1 million. But we have the power of perspective to look past that and see the culmination of 100 little decisions every single day by Jane Addams to make a difference. Your calling, like Jane Addams, isn't far off or abstract. It starts right where you are. It starts with a decision to be present, to engage the world in front of you instead of drifting through it or escaping from it. One of the people that best lived this kind of calling was a man named Abraham Kuyper. Being homeschoolers, maybe some of you have read Kuyper. Kuyper wore many hats. He was a pastor, a theologian, a journalist, and eventually became prime minister of his country, the Netherlands. But what made him remarkable was his conviction that faith could shape everything in life. He looked at the world, not just the church, pews, or prayer closets, and said, that belongs to God too. He once wrote, "There's not a square inch in the whole dominion of our human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry mine." In other words, your whole life matters. Not just your spiritual life, not just your work, not just friendship, not just your vote. Your calling isn't something you stumble into. It's something you build every square inch at a time. I find in our day and age, especially when we're younger, it's common to think that something is happening to us, that life is coming at us. And this is a decidedly secular view of our existence that robs us of the power of the gospel to transform our lives and communities. Kuyper believes something quite opposite. He was intentional about moving his beliefs from his mind into action. He founded the Free University of Amsterdam so students could think Christianly about every field, not just theology, but law, journalism, science, and maybe some of the fields that you are all going into. He started a Christian newspaper, believing the public square needed voices rooted in truth and compassion. He launched a political party, not to seek control, but to serve, especially the working class and the poor. He ran for office to prove that faith and public life are not enemies, but they belong together. And Kuyper didn't do this to impose his beliefs. He believed in an idea called pluralism, the idea that convictions can coexist in a free society with each other. And his vision of public life wasn't domination. It was about building a community where principled people could disagree and still seek the common good together. When Christ is king, we don't coerce. We build hope with each other. Now, he didn't, as I've said, retreat from culture. He engaged it with confidence to win it over. um, winded over through hundreds of thousands of gospel-powered decisions made across society in every single area. He believed that when Christians step into their vocations with humility, conviction, and the gospel, the world begins to look more like God's kingdom. Kuyper emphasized that faith isn't confined to private spirituality. It expresses itself through concrete action at work, at home, in relationships, and that loving our neighbor isn't theoretical. It's a daily choice to walk across the street and shake hands with your neighbor, the forgotten, and build lasting institutions of compassion and care. And those daily choices can eventually build into something special. While they resisted conformity and embraced transformation, they called us to be countercultural. And in this day and age, we are countercultural as Christians. Not through loud protests, but we achieve it through quiet, consistent actions of grace and truth and mercy. Both figures remind us that institutions matter. Jane Addams built Hull House not for fame, but for her community. Kuyper founded schools, newspapers, and lasting change came from nurturing those strong institutions in their time. So what is an institution? It's simply a group of people working together for a common purpose. A school exists to cultivate minds, a church to nurture souls, a business solves problems through profit, a nonprofit solves problems with compassion, a government upholds justice and order, and most importantly, a family exists to nurture individuals, to pass down values, and to love each other through life. You're called not to withdraw from society, but to actively build one of these institutions, to invest in your lives, in creating communities where love, truth, and mercy flourish. And when your story is complete, it won't be your follower count or accomplishments that matter or that define you. It will be the lives of the people that you touched, those who stood by your side. And were you able to take those small actions and then amplify them into something lasting, like an institution for the good of your community? Graduates, the world awaits your unique contributions. It's noisy and chaotic, and you're not called to shout louder. You're called to be present, to serve, and then to transform the world around you. Like our Lord, his influence on the 12 around him echoed through a town, and then a region, and then throughout history because he was working from a place of love. So who will carry you to the river? If you don't know yet, start looking. That's the first step. Take a few risks. Have a conversation with somebody that scares you, or something that scares you. Don't converse with people that scare you. I should have double spaced this like Caleb. He's a good speaker. Invite somebody to lunch or go for a walk with a friend. Spend time with each other and be intentional about that as you get older, because this is your best chance of friendship. The older you get, and 3 kids, it's a little harder to get together. Join a group that shares your values, or start one, and make friendship a core value in your life, not just in this time period, but throughout it. Because as we stand on the edge of artificial intelligence, which will bring about change at a pace that we can't even imagine at this point, the most important investment that you can make is in your future is by grounding it in relationships. Find people in your life who echo that famous C.S. Lewis quote, "Friendship is born at the moment when one person says to another, 'What? You too? I thought I was the only one.'" But you have to choose it first. You have to make the choice to make friendship a core value. As Stephen Covey writes in The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, begin with the end in mind. You have the benefit of beginning with your end in mind. I'm halfway through. Some of us here are closer than we'd like. There are certainly things that I would do differently, and this is one of them, which is why I'm giving you this talk. Every habit is formed twice, once in your imagination and once in the real world. The lives of Jane Addams and Abraham Kuyper weren't defined by grand gestures. They didn't get to the status that they had overnight. They were built through daily choices, small and faithful decisions made again and again that were then put into action. That's how real change happens. It happens inside of us, in our families, and beyond. Now, you don't need to have everything figured out. And I remember sitting in your seat. I don't remember who gave the commencement, and you probably won't either. But I do remember feeling pretty nervous and scared about what I was going to do next. I can assure you that at 41, I'm far from knowing very much. and even farther from living up to what I spoke about today. It's always 2 steps forward, 1 step back, which sometimes causes me to still get discouraged. But when I look back on the course of my life, over these 41 years, I've continued to move forward. So just start where you are. Take chances, do the next right thing, and over time you'll look back and see that those small decisions built something meaningful and something that mattered. Thank you.